Every time I get an opportunity, I bring before you one of the giants in African American music, a great performer, a great composer, a major force in establishing African American music on this campus, the jazz program. He was here before Max and Archie and everybody came. When they came, Fred Tillis was already here. He was already here. Right? He had plowed the ground so that when we showed up, we could kind of rest kind of easy because he had already done a lot of the heavy lifting. And so I prevailed upon Fred to give us a solo on it. He's a wonderful saxophone player. So they have Professor Fred Tillis.
Dr. Tillis was born in Galveston, Texas on January 5th, 1930. He was a graduate of Wiley College, where he received his BA degree at the age of 19, and then he went on to receive both his Master of Arts degree and his PhD in music composition from the University of Iowa. His catalog includes more than 125 compositions.
So I asked him how many pieces had he written in his life. So he told me that when he was young, one of his composition teachers told him, for every year that you're on this earth, you should have a piece.
He was the most consummate musician that I ever had the experience to work with.
Over 125 compositions as well as 15 books of poetry.
He showed up with an extra suitcase full of poetry. He carried a little notebook and a pencil, a stub of a pencil that he would stop in the middle of the road in traffic, and an idea had come to him and he would write down that poetry.
His music reflects all the various cultural and artistic influences that Fred had during his life, and yet Fred's music is instantly recognizable and remarkably compelling in its beauty, its melodic inventiveness, its harmonic ingenuity, and its very, very clear structure and form.
A color light with a hint of grace, as we begin to sample life at a lively pace. The rhythm swings and melodies all ring in a playful French again, like a new Latin tinge of Latin phrase. Now it's a Latin phrase.
Fred was also one of the nicest human beings I've ever met.
He was such a happy and positive person.
He smiled a lot.
The way he responded was always kind and civil.
He had such a kind and welcoming demeanor, and made it very easy for students to want to come up and participate.
I was going into class, and my father, after the strokes, was a little limited, so he couldn't get out and walk in. So Dr. Tillis took it upon himself to come out, and he met my mom and dad, and he shook hands with my father, and he made my father and mother feel like $1 million.
I can say this: I'm hearing now in the 21st century some interpretations by young musicians that are alive today that bring some of what the 20th century is. In other words, they're mixing up the young people. Some of the young people that you're talking about maybe haven't worked. They're bringing in an attitude towards the European classical music tradition that also is a part of the American classical tradition, which is jazz.
Please stand in a moment of silent tribute to the memory of Dr. Frederick Charles Tillis.
The students were wanting to have some jazz because the faculty didn't want jazz. And I told them that I would take it and I would start a jazz program. I started the jazz ensemble, and a guy who was the head librarian, he was a clarinet player, and he was mine. And the two of us started the program. The next year, in '73, Boyer took over the jazz history. That was the jazz program personnel, three of us, for a while. It took 9 years for us to get a major in jazz. 9 years, because we still had opposition to it. But it also had gained some kind of credibility. But the diehards put up a good fight. But after 9 years, we got a major in jazz.
That's huge.
Professor Fred Tillis.
Dr. Frederick Charles Tillis.
Dr. Tillis.
Dr. Tillis.
Dr. Tillis.
Dr. Tillis. Fred.
Dr. Tillis.
Dr. Tillis.
Uncle Fred.
Dr. Tillis.
Fred.
Dr. Fred Tillis.
Dr. Fred Tillis.
Professor Frederick Tillis.
Fred Tillis. Let's give it up for Fred Tillis.